Hey, welcome to another Third Apron podcast. I'm Yossi Goslin, your host, NBA salary cap analyst, and this is another offseason preview in my series. Almost done with every single team. And joining me today to discuss the Utah Jazz, I've got one of the best guys covering them today. You can see all his work on The Athletic, Tony Jones. Tony, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you being on for this. So, the Jazz, their offseason definitely got a lot more interesting last week. So after the hiring of Austin Ainge to be president of basketball operations, so now they've completed year 3 of their rebuild. Some pretty good veterans, lots of picks. They've got about like 11 future picks over through 2032. Some decent to interesting young players. No cornerstone yet. That's the biggest hole right now. Could still take some time to find out. Hopefully they can get him in this draft. But now with Austin coming in, we know a lot of Danny's philosophy from his time in Boston, and now it's kind of a lot of it is like try to extract as much value in the transaction based on his trades in Boston and the Rudy Gobert, Donovan Mitchell trade, and kind of be patient and try to use those picks to find your next guys. Could there be a potentially slightly different approach with Austin now coming in and being the lead decision maker?
Hold up. I have a kink in my throat. Can we just start over? Hold on. Let me get
Uh,
this. Let me
this
get
is
this.
live, Tony. We're live.
Oh, we're live. Okay.
Yeah. Take your time.
Hold on. Sorry about that.
No, you're
Um,
good.
I think that um, with Austin, I think that it'll be interesting to see what changes because he's taking over the front office. This isn't going to be something where he's working in concert with, Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge. He's the guy. So his philosophy is going to determine the shape and the direction that the Jazz go in. And one of the biggest things that he said was, we're not going to see any manipulating in the minutes. We're not going to see, you know, um, any tanking. I mean, the context is, what's the roster look like in August and whether that roster is set up to win or whether that roster is set up to lose. Um, but whatever roster it is, they're going to let Will Hardy coach that roster and they're going to they're going to try to win as many games as possible. So, I think that those are interesting, subplots for the Jazz, as they head into their offseason. What I do know is that, with the pick that they have, everything is on the table, trading up, staying put, making the pick, trading back, maybe collecting a few assets, maybe trying to trade up from pick number 21 to try to get into the mid-teens. They have Neat Clifford coming in on Friday, and he's somebody that they would love to pick with 21, but they don't know that he's going to be available at 21. So um, so many things are on the table with what Utah can do, and it really sets them up to be a fascinating team to watch over the next month.
So let's talk about a little bit how they can go about their offseason if the plan is not to bottom out and maybe take a little bit of a step to be a little more competitive. I still feel like they're probably at least a year away, maybe two, before they could really get into like the play in conversation. But I guess we could start with the draft. Unfortunately, they had the worst record, best odds fell down to 5, and they could potentially move up a couple spots. Like the Sixers seem like a team. They've been heavily rumored now as a team to trade down. Not sure there's an exact fit there. And if there's like an exact match, as in like a trade between Philly and Utah, uh, if there's a like somewhat of a bidding war for teams to get up to 3, then how deep do the Jazz want to go in terms of how aggressive they'd want to be? Is it something they'd be willing to do where like they trade a future pick along with 21? I don't know if that's worth it to move up to 3. So I do think, yeah, moving up from maybe 21 or maybe getting another pick. Maybe there's something you could do to package your seconds in a future pick. So I think that's definitely one way that they can do it. The other, and I'm the one other way I'm kind of like a little more interested in of what the Jazz could do to kind of like speed things up a little bit. Because after year three, that's kind of like most teams don't they want to they don't want to be like in the lottery after like 3 straight years. They're gonna want to pick things up a little bit. So understand if they don't want to completely bottom out, maybe be somewhere in be just take a little step forward. I'm curious if maybe they want to start to target some young players, like more established young players that are maybe either just finished their rookie deals or maybe are like about to finish their rookie deals and like are about to extend. Um, I wonder if like because they mostly have like first second year guys could make a difference if they bring in some like slightly older players to push things forward a little bit. I mean, has that kind of been something that you could see the Jazz potentially trying to do to be a little more competitive and speed up the timeline?
Well, I mean, I think they could, but what does that look like? Do they, let's just say for the sake of argument, this is not me reporting anything, but let's say for the sake of argument, um, you go and trade for a Trey Young, or what if you offer, 5 and 21 and maybe a future first and try to get 7 in Trey Murphy, and pair Trey Murphy with, Lowry Markkinen or something like that. Um, there's a number of different ways that they can go. Um, I don't know that I see them trading up to 3 because 3 is kind of the same tier of players as 5 is. If I were the Jazz and I were trading up, I'd be trying to trade up to 2 and try to get a definitive, you know, potential future franchise piece in Dylan Harper. Um, I think you could see the Jazz doing something like that. You know, the thing that I know that I can say is, that there are no sacred cows on the Jazz right now. You know, there's no untouchables. Anybody can be drafted over. Um, anybody can be traded. There are people who I consider more likely to be traded than not. But if you make a really good offer for Lowry Marketing that the Jazz are like, yeah, I like this offer. Lowry Marketing can be traded. Same thing as Walker Kessler. Now those guys are people that the Jazz um, are people that the Jazz really value. So it'll take a lot, but I mean it's possible. So I think you look at that and you look at what they could do in terms of the draft, the flexibility, as you said, they have a whole bunch of picks. It makes sense to see that the Jazz are going to keep um, every option open, every door open, see what shakes out during the trade season. Free agency, and see what options are there for them. And if the option is there for them to get older and to go out and make a trade for an impact player, they're going to do it. But if the best path for them is to, keep tearing it all down and play with a bunch of kids next year, they're not afraid to do that either. But what they will do, whatever roster they put on the floor, you're not going to see some of the stuff that you did this season. They're going to play hard next year.
So, yeah, there's just a lot of different ways the Jazz can go about it. I agree with you. I think moving up to 3 doesn't really make that much sense for them. Moving up to 2, I definitely think that's possible if the Spurs, cause the Jazz can be a facilitator in whatever type of move that they end up doing. Like, so for number 2, for example, if the Spurs end up getting, if they're in a position to get a superstar that they really want, and that involves number two. Maybe there's a way that the Jazz couldn't get involved, take on some bad money, trade number five or whatever, an additional future pick, whatever it is. I think the Jazz have the means to get up to number two if that is in play. As far as potentially getting some other young players, so like you just mentioned as an example, just a hypothetical, like they could go after a guy like Trae Young. In that same vein, they could potentially go after a guy making a max like a Darius Garland, for example. Like they have enough draft picks, they have enough veterans where they can make an acceptable offer if those type of guys became available. I still feel like, they're still kind of far away from doing something quite like that. So as a facilitator, I'm kind of keeping my eye on to see if there's other teams like Houston, for example, who could be in the market for a superstar. What if the Jazz wanna can get involved and take on some of the young guys that the Rockets might be sending out? Whether that could be like a Jalen Green, Jabari Smith. Another example could be if the Pistons, if they make a big move, maybe guys like Jaden Ivey or one of their young wings like Holland, maybe those guys could be in play in that type of move. That's very hypothetical, but I that's the kind of thing I'm looking at where the Jazz are not getting a veteran like a very high end veteran who's probably not going to who's not going to like help raise them to like a playing level now. But you got like a couple older, still young players that still could be a part of the next Jazz team going forward. Still have some room to develop. Does any of those does that type of does that type of strategy kind of appeal to you if you had a say in it?
Yes and no. I think if you're bringing in somebody that you're going to have to pay, um, you know, you know, I don't know that it'd be Jalen Green or Jaden Ivey, you know, per se. You know, the guy that I would pay Trey Murphy. Like I'd trade for Trey Murphy in a heartbeat. Um, you know, the thing right now that's on the table, like let's say the Jazz say, hey, you know what? We've gone 3 years. We don't have a franchise altering prospect on our roster right now. And the Jazz know this, right? Like they know that, they have some good young pieces, but they don't have the guy right now. So because we don't have the guy, because we didn't get Cooper Flag, let's say that let's say that getting the number two is probably not feasible. So what do you do right there? You possibly draft Kaman Malawach from Duke, right? He's 18 years old, and he plays the same um, position as Walker Kessler. So what does that do for the Jazz? What that does is it resets the timeline, right? Because you can draft Malawach, who's 18 years old, and you can say, you know what? Hey, Walker Kessler, um, we know that the Lakers will give us a haul for you, and we'll possibly trade you to the Los Angeles Lakers, and just reset the timeline and restart the timeline altogether. Now, I got to say this again. This is not reporting. This is just Tony Jones, me, just kind of spitballing here. So I don't want to be aggregated. But it's those are the kind of things that those are the kind of decisions that the Jazz have to make. So I think something like that, or you have to choose between let's say that VJ Edgecombe and Trey Johnson are off the board. Do we want Ace Bailey, or do we want Malawach, or do we want Jeremiah Fears, or do we want Con Knipple? You look at that, and you have to, see if that happens, or maybe best case scenario, one of VJ Edgecombe or Trey Johnson are there at number 5. And the Jazz, are like, okay, one of these guys that we really like are available, and then you pick one of those guys. So, I just think that, there are, even though we are less than 2 weeks away from the draft, it still seems like so many things have to happen. The Jazz, according to Sarah Todd of the Deseret News, have already had Trey Johnson in for a workout. They expect to get Ace Bailey and VJ Edgecombe and Malawach and Con Canepo in for workouts as well over the next 2 weeks. So I think that a lot will be told then. Maybe they fall in love with a prospect. Maybe they don't, and maybe something happens on the trade market that they feel like makes sense to them.
So you make a good point about how, depending on if they were to bring some of these younger players that are about to get paid, yeah, the fact that they are about to be extension eligible and they're going to get a big raise, that does complicate things. But that's a good segue to what I wanted to get to next, which is the current veterans that they have. They've got, aside from Larry Markkinen on his max deal, you got John Collins, Colin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, and they're all expiring right now. They're all, with the exception of Clarkson, yeah, the John Collins, Colin Sexton, they're extension eligible, but they're all expiring. The Jazz can have a lot of cap space next summer. They have a lot of flexibility. So on one hand, yeah, if the Jazz are going to bring in some young guys that are about to get paid, that could complicate things a little bit. But seeing that, I'm sure these guys they can be had. They're if another team wants to acquire them, I'm sure there's a trade to be made. If these players are already expiring or outgoing, then you're starting to make some room for some potential other young guys that you can bring in. If there's any guys like about to be on their third year or already on their fifth year, just got paid, the Jazz do have some flexibility if they want to bring them in. It's just a matter of who it is that they want. If there's someone that they identify that could be a part of the next core. But as far as the current vets, I mean, I would get the feeling they'll see what's out there for them. They've like Collins, Sexton, Clarkson. I'm sure a lot of people paying attention to the league probably expect at least one or two of them to have been moved by now, but they haven't. I mean, is it possible that the Jazz might even look to keep them long term, or could it be the type, or would they just play it out and just see how things go before making any decision?
I think that the two guys that the Jazz will try to trade um, will try to put some effort into trading or John Collins and Colin Sexton. Um, and I would say Jordan Clarkson is a part of that as well. I think that Collins, his contract is, moves to an expiring, but he does have a player option at the end of that. So, I expect him to pick up his player option on that as well. But that's a year away. Um, but I
But
think
Colin's
Collins.
got the player option right now. He's got to decide
Oh,
on it.
yeah.
So one thing and then I'll, sorry for interrupting, but something he
No,
could
for sure.
do is restructure it where he can decline it. The new CBA now lets you get a lower salary on the option. So that's just something they could consider. Maybe he'd be willing to like decrease it a little bit to make it a little easier for other teams to trade for him. And then he ends up getting like a couple more years guaranteed to make it worthwhile for him.
Right. No, for sure. And he had a really good year. He had his best shooting year of his career, by leaps and bounds. So I think that there's going to be. I think that there's potential to be some interest on the market for him. Clarkson, that'll be interesting. I believe he's going into the last year of his contract. I believe that Colin Sexton is going into the final year of his contract as well. So they have a lot of pieces. They could keep these pieces and just kind of reset their books or continue to reset their books because you're going into year three for Keontae George. So next year at this time, they're going to have to make a decision on what an extension will look like for him. Um, you still have a couple of years for Kyle Filipowski and Isaiah Collier, but they have to, assuming they don't trade Walker Kessler, they have to make a financial decision on him this summer as well. So, you know, and he's somebody who the Jazz value a ton. Um, so that's the I think that's the rough part of what this rebuild has been for the Jazz, that they're getting to a point where they have to make decisions, and those decisions, in a couple of cases, are going to be based on incomplete evidence. Like, next year, they're going to have to figure out what they want to do with Taylor Hendricks. Taylor Hendricks missed an entire season, and it's very possible that he is not 100% this entire season coming up. So you're gonna have to make a decision based on that. I think that um, because of that, there are going to be some tough spots, and that's what you know the Malawatch the Malawatch example it might be prevalent, because maybe the Jazz are saying, hey, we might really just need to reset the timeline here and try to start this over. But if, let's say, they go the other way, let's say, again, I'm not reporting this, don't aggregate me. Let's just say they trade for Trae Young. Well, then you have Trae Young, you have Larry Markkinen, and you have Walker Kessler. Now, that's not going to get you to the top of the Western Conference, obviously. Maybe that gets you to the play-in, but at least it's something. And at least now we have pieces in place where we can start to actually evaluate people. So that's going to be, those parts are interesting as well. And the one thing that we haven't mentioned is Cody Williams. And Cody had a historically difficult rookie season, and he's taking up one of the premium picks that the Jazz had. So his development next season, this summer through next season, is going to be a real key. The Jazz need him to be good. They need him to develop, because they don't need to wake up 2 or 3 years from now and see that they essentially wasted a lottery pick in the 2024 draft. So Williams is going to be a real key figure this year and next.
Yeah, Cody Williams, by a lot of metrics, like had one of the worst statistical, like not just rookie seasons, but like like among all players. So that's going to be huge. Because yeah, if that pick doesn't pan out, then yeah, you are kind of looking at, as you mentioned, they might have to push this thing a little longer. It's already been 3 years. Most teams at this point would already want to just make the step towards the play-in, and I like I said earlier, I feel like they're still at least, they're probably like realistically kind of like 2 years away at least, if they can hit on some of their picks this year. Uh, like you look at the Thunder, they missed on some of their picks early on in this rebuild, like 2020. They packaged some picks for Pokuševski, that didn't work out. The following year, they took Josh Giddey with their top pick. That was like an okay pick. But then 2022, they established their core like right there. They got Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren right there. Like the Jazz could really turn it around in one draft, and hopefully like that can happen in this draft and no later than that next one, and they could slowly get back into things sooner. So with the veterans, basically, I'm sure like to some extent they brought in Collins and Sexton and as players that they could potentially flip later for more than what they gave up to get them. But now that they're expiring, I'm not sure they have quite as much value as the Jazz might hope, which is why I bring up, well, maybe there's like an extension that they could potentially do that keeps them trade eligible so they don't have to wait 6 months. But, you add a couple years and then maybe that makes them a little more attractive to interested teams. So that's something I'd be keeping an eye on. Maybe the Jazz could potentially look to extend them. And then, I mean, that's a good segue to the last thing we didn't you've been touching on, Walker Kessler, also extension eligible this summer. So in a way, yeah, they do need to decide if they, what to pay him and if they want to pay him. Uh, at the same time, they could actually play things out a little bit where if they want to see a little more from him, there's there's actually a good case to taking it into restricted free agency because they could still have all that cap space that I mentioned if they don't add any long-term money, if they're not like extending a lot of these guys, and be able to re-sign Kessler because he was such a low pick. They can make him a restricted free agent. He has a low cap hold, and they could still, so they can, kind of like what the Sixers did with Tyrese Maxey a couple last summer. So I'm kind of curious to see if they want to play things out a little more because he's been in rumors for like a year almost now. He's being linked to the Lakers. It's been like a constant rumor. Um, I think it just at this point it's more so not so much if they what to pay him. I think it's more so like, is he the guy that you want? Is he the guy you want the center of your future? If they don't view him that way, then I think it would then yeah, I think it makes sense to probably just move on from him now and get like the type of haul that they're hoping to get.
So I would say that's a yes in terms of, what kind of player he is. Um, my opinion is I think that he's somebody who can challenge for a defensive player of the year at some point in his career. I think that he's a guy who could, he could be one of those random two-time All-Stars at the end of a career that we look back and be like, oh, that guy made two All-Star games. Like, he's like the Jeff Teague of centers, right? Like, Jeff Teague was a really good point guard, made an All-Star team. We didn't think of him as a Hall of Famer or, but he's, Walker's a really, really, really good defender. And he's a really impactful defender. And I think if you put him with the right point guard, he can be an impactful offensive player as a rim runner and as a vertical lob threat. So um, I think you look at it that way. I think the question for the Jazz is this. Right now, the player that Walker Kessler is, and we could say the same thing for Taylor Hendricks, the player that Walker Kessler is, he probably makes more sense for a winning team. He probably makes less sense for a team that what the Jazz were last season. We don't know what the Jazz are going to be next season. We don't know what their philosophy yet is going to be. But Walker made less sense for a 17-win team. He makes more sense for a team, that's trying to really do something in the playoffs / win a championship. So he's, he's not gonna he drives winning. But obviously offensively, he's probably got to be, your fourth option. But defensively, he can be your first option. He can be the best defensive player, in my opinion, on a championship caliber team. So what is that worth to the Utah Jazz? I think that if he's on your roster, you definitely got to pay him. But if you're not, obviously, if you don't want to pay him, 140, $150 million just yet, then, maybe you do reset the timeline. Maybe you do trade him. Trading Walker resets the timeline. Trading, let's say, Keontae George doesn't reset the timeline because Keontae's not there yet. But Walker's there. The Jazz have to make a decision now. So That's going to be something that has to be talked about. And that's one of the reasons why. Okay, if we keep Walker, do we try to trade for Trey Young, or trade for Trey Murphy, or do we call the Orlando Magic and see what they want for Jalen Suggs or something like that? Please don't aggregate me. This is not me reporting anything. Um, and then, so Walker's situation is fascinating to me because I think in a lot of ways he's going to be the litmus of what we see the Jazz and what direction we see the Utah Jazz go in 2020 for the 2025-2026 season and beyond.
So you mentioned some like a range, maybe like 140, 150 million. Like, yeah, over 5 years, based on what some recent big men like Nick Claxton, Jared Allen just got in their new deals. I feel like that's probably something realistic that Walker Kessler would probably command in his extension. So one, like I mentioned, I think the biggest thing for the Jazz is, is he a player that they want to invest in going forward? But two, if they do feel to a degree yes, and they're comfortable paying him that amount, then I think it kind of comes down to, is he a guy that we can maybe get more for on that deal later if he still has a couple steps to go up, or while is it do they get more now while he still has 1 year left on this rookie deal, only making what, 4 million, I think, $5 million this upcoming season. So for another team, there's a lot of value in bringing him in now while he's still on that contract, so that can help them for a contending team do more things this year. So there's a lot of value there, and then also they have that team will have the option to negotiate with him. So I feel like both ways is kind of like fine. I feel like they should be in a good spot whether they extend him or run or play things out or a little longer. I think as far as I think they're in a fine spot whichever way they go with him, but I think we covered just about everything, Tony. A lot of different ways this offseason could go. Still pretty unclear exactly how they'll go about it, and it would all start on the draft. It all started in the draft, so we'll get more answers once we get closer to there. But Tony, thank you for joining me again. Do you have anything coming up we should be on the lookout for?
Um, what am I mean, obviously draft coverage, that's going to be wall to wall, and summer league coverage and free agency coverage. So, I'm looking forward to the offseason starting. I love the season, but I think the offseason is so fascinating, and it's one of my favorite times of year because we don't know what can happen. I remember in 2019, I believe. I remember in 2019 sitting in a restaurant in Las Vegas, and in real time, Paul George and getting traded to the Los Angeles Clippers, while Kawhi Leonard, minutes after Kawhi Leonard um, committed to the Clippers. So, you never know what can happen in the offseason. So, I'm definitely looking forward to all of that.
Yeah, 2019 I feel like was the peak of off-season madness. We still haven't seen. I don't know if it'll quite get topped. I wasn't covering the NBA just yet. I started about like 2021, I think. But I could only imagine what it was like in Vegas the moment that happened. But yeah, everyone, make sure you're following Tony on Twitter at T Jones on the NBA, and check out all his work on The Athletic. And make sure you're following me on Twitter at my name and Blue Sky Yossi Gaza, and I'll be reacting to all the transactions of the offseason with salary cap analysis as soon as they happen. And subscribe to Third Apron on wherever you get your podcast, the newsletter on Substack. And I will be pretty active throughout the week. I'll have more streams and videos coming up. Thanks, everyone.